Hey everyone, I thought it might be helpful to put together a short little video primer on how to more effectively teach this lesson on digital footprint. So what I'm going to be doing is just going over some hints and give you a little bit more background so that you can use that when you are leading the discussions in the lesson with your students. So first things first, remember that down here in the notes section are some more notes to give you ideas of what the point of each slide is, as well as some things to say. You also have that lesson plan and the support documents to go along with it. But essentially, if I was going to teach this lesson, here's what I would do. I'd start off by just introducing it as a discussion of what digital footprint is. We're going to be focusing on digital footprint in this lesson. Does anybody know what that is? Giving students a chance to share out what they think it is or what it encompasses. Then moving on to this, which is the definition. It's a very simple definition of information that can be found in person online. So, and that we're talking about any information that is in a digital or electronic form. Sometimes it's known as a digital shadow, but digital footprint is generally the more accepted term. And at this point, I would give students a couple minutes to turn to an elbow partner, or if you have them in groups, that's an option as well, putting them into groups and giving them a chance to kind of think about what kinds of things make up a person's digital footprint, which is the purpose of this slide, giving them a chance to share and discuss so they can maybe try to figure out what that is. You may also want to give them some hints if you want to. If they're having trouble discussing, you have some discussion questions and some prompts here if they're not coming up with ideas. But giving them a couple of minutes to do that and then trying to capture everything the room comes up with. Essentially anything that is information that sits in a digital format, whether it is private or public, is a part of a person's digital footprint. So the really common answers are going to be things like social media accounts, instant messages and texts they send, websites they create, but it also includes things like information about how they have done in athletics, if the school publishes or if they're published in a newsletter that's online, information about their credit score, information about their DMV record, information about places that they've lived, because anytime you switch addresses, that information can actually be accessed online. So all of these things are things that can be a part of a person's digital footprint. Any digital information that resides online, public or private, counts. And what we really want them to start to think of is that not just to take this for granted. In this slide, you can show them the quote and talk a little bit about the value of this information, that there are entire industries, both legal and illegal, that are basically born out of working with this information, coming up with it, processing it, and selling it to people. And so what we really want them to get is that this has value. Whether or not they think that their online life has value to them, it has value to someone. And we want them to recognize that it has value and the different ways in which people interpret them and think about them online. And so that's really what we're trying to do is talk about how they can put their best digital footprint forward and get them thinking about what their online digital footprint says about them. So to that end, we're going to move to the next part of the lesson, which is showing this video. It's very short. You can ask them to write down some answers to these questions that are in the handout that's included in the lesson. Just gets them thinking. Afterwards, you may want to use some of these discussion points. You don't have to use all of them. Really, all you're trying to do in this part of the lesson is get them to realize two things. That number one, a digital footprint, when people find it, it doesn't always give the full picture of an individual, but they can be judged based on just what is found, and that colleges, employers, and any organization they want to join, a lot of them, and in fact the majority now we know thanks to studies that have been done, use this information in determining whether or not they should be admitted or allowed to join. And that's really important because that didn't used to be the case, and it's a trend we're seeing more and more. And this is it should resonate with them as seniors that this is something that they can't just take for granted anymore. To kind of hit that point home, the next part of the lesson talks a little bit about some instances in which this has cost people, and unfairly in some ways too. So this link right down here will take them to an online article about this group of young ladies. This actually just happened a couple of months ago. The Little League World Series, these were the champions from the state of Virginia who were automatically disqualified because of an inappropriate picture that they posted, that some of them posted online. So generally what I would do is I would have them open up their computers at this point, read the article, I would ask a few of them to summarize what they came up with, and then I'd ask them, do you think this was fair? And if so, why or why? And if so, why? And if not, why not? The majority of them are probably going to think it's pretty harsh. In fact, that's what most people said in the news. But the point is that it happened. And that because of the actions of a couple of ladies on this team that made a poor choice by posting a picture that was inappropriate and mocked one of their defeated rivals, their entire team was disqualified. And ask them too, like, how would you feel if you were on a team and a couple of your friends posted something that essentially ruined your season, or if you did something which you didn't think was a big deal and it ended up costing your teammates their season? So really getting them to think about like the cost of not maintaining good digital vigilance when it comes to digital footprint. So this kind of tells them, it's kind of designed to show them it actually does matter. Even if it doesn't matter to you, it matters to other people. And then to kind of further illustrate how digital footprint can be in some cases misinterpreted, and they want to be very careful with what they're posting online and putting out there. I have this. So this is just a picture I took off of Instagram. You show it to them and you say, if you found this picture on someone's social media account, what would you think of this person? You can ask them to just like popcorn out words or descriptors. Then you might also say, like, you might ask them, okay, but whatever they come up with, whatever it is, whatever their comments are, ask them, do you have a more favorable or unfavorable opinion of this individual based on this one post? Some of them are probably going to say unfavorable. Some of them might say, well, I really don't care because I wouldn't judge somebody just based on that. And that's totally fair. And that's kind of the direction you want them to go, is to say that it doesn't matter because it's just one picture. And then you have to say, well, that's true, but what if you're an admissions officer at a college and you have an abundance of people trying to get into your school? Which is very true. I mean, schools like Harvard and Stanford routinely only admit between 4 and 5% of the people that apply. And a lot of the people that are rejected are just as good, and in some cases better than some of the people who are admitted. Because they have to realize that if they're going to a school that is competitive, they're going to be compared against other people. And in some cases, they're going to be compared against people just like them. And that information that they find online, like digital footprint information, could be used to determine whether they are in or out. So even if they don't want to judge number 2 here, right here, because he's a smoker, if there are 4 of them, let's say these 4 students are all trying to get into the same school, and you had to choose, and you had to rank the order, 1, 2, 3, 4, who you would want to admit in what order, who would you choose now? Or who would be at the bottom of your list just based on this one post? And again, they may say that that's very unlikely, or I don't know about that. But you have to understand that the amount of time that most admissions counselors have to do this kind of research, in some cases they only have enough time to find or peruse somebody's social media, and they may not get a full picture. So they really want to make sure that when they're posting things and putting them out there publicly like this, that they're really doing a good job of showing who they really are and making sure that the account is representative. To the example of the kid with the cigarette, if you were to go into a social media account and look at the next 4 posts below this one, you'd find this kind of information. You can kind of show them that, now what would your opinion be of this person? And of course they would say, well, it's a lot better. And you say, so what would your opinion be of this person had you eliminated that one post? And get them really thinking about how a digital footprint can be used to maximize their attractiveness to an institution. Here are just some hard facts to hit them with to get them to think a little bit more. You can say that even if something like athletics or something like even if college isn't your end goal, you're probably going to want to have a good job at some point. We'll look at these statistics. It's really important that you point out this last one, that since 2006, the amount of employers that say they use social media to screen candidates has gone up exponentially, and that this is a trend that is continuing, and it's only going to keep continuing. And in fact, there are entire organizations and there are entire businesses that vet candidates based on their social media profile. So I would just keep that in mind when you're doing this. It's something really to let them know that their digital footprint does matter. It matters to people who have things that they want, such as jobs or admissions to colleges, and it's not going away. They may even have some folk. You might even open it up to the students at this point and say, "Does anybody have any stories about this?" Because it's very possible that they know somebody who may have lost an opportunity due to a poor choice that they made posting things online. It's kind of up to you, but really you just want them to get to thinking about this is something that it can be if they aren't careful with what they're putting out there, it can be a huge disadvantage to them when they're applying for things. But at the end of this, we're going to talk about how they can make it an advantage. Following this, depending on the amount of time you have, we have two different activities. One is the next two green slides, and one is the next two gray slides. For the green slides, this link down here takes them to a folder full of articles. This is kind of a self-guided activity, a little bit less discussion-based. If you'd like something that's not quite that's a little bit less teacher-centered. Essentially, you assign them in pairs or in groups an article. They read the article. They discuss what they learned with their partners and are prepared to summarize it. They think about what choice or actions could have prevented or helped the person in terms of their digital footprint, and then at the end they come up with a guideline, and this is stuff they can record on the handout that goes along with the activity. This slide right here is actually just for your information. It's a large assortment of articles, including the ones that are in the folder about some instances of digital citizenship and just things going wrong and people making poor choices. But this is the slide you would put up for this activity. You can probably give them about, I'd say for the whole thing, probably about 10 minutes to read the article, summarize it, and come up with a guideline, and then maybe another 10 minutes to share as well, whatever you have. That's a little bit longer of one, so depending on how you're doing with this lesson and how long you need it to go, you might want to choose this because it takes a little bit longer. Or you can skip down to the gray slides, and you can do admission day. So for admission day, this link is going to take you to a folder that has two packets, essentially. And these two packets are research information, social media information, digital footprint info about two students who are essentially identical. They have the same grades, they're the same gender, they have the same ethnicity, they have the same strong recommendations. The only difference between these two students are their digital footprints. And their job is to play the role of an admissions counselor and decide who out of the two of them should get admitted to their school. So the activity goes like this, that they would look over the two profiles of the applicants. The directions, by the way, are down here. They would record both positive and negative aspects of the student's digital footprints on that handout that comes with the lesson. They would discuss their findings with their neighbors and then share who they chose and why they chose that individual. And they could have very differing interpretations of that information, but it gives them an idea how digital citizenship information, what are some things that can be pulled out of it and gleaned that are good, and how it can also hurt somebody. And we really want them to start thinking about things that they can do or that they are doing that are positive, because we don't want this to just become a really just like dumping on them negative lesson. We want them to learn about things they can do. And to that end, then you would consider this next lesson. This is the kind of the close to the lesson. You want students to kind of come up with some action steps or some guidelines that they would consider or recommend to people in regards to digital footprint. So the activity is very simple. You give them just a little bit of time. Based on what they've learned, what kind of advice would they give to somebody to make sure that an online presence, their digital footprint, represents their best self and maximizes the positive the positive impact, or maximizes the positive effect if somebody was to look at their account. So I would give them maybe spend about 5 to 10 minutes on this, depending on how much time you have left, to come up with a list of guidelines, things that they should be sure to do. There are about 5 that are recommended by most social media consultants. Yes, that is really a job that they should keep in mind. The first one is that just because you've gotten what you wanted doesn't mean slack off, because a lot of schools and a lot of teams, a lot of employers have policies in regards to image and branding that prevents employees from doing anything publicly that would degrade the image of the company or the college. So it's important that just because they're accepted doesn't mean they can slack off. Another thing, and it's something called the grandmother principle, is that if they're posting something that would offend their grandmother, they should definitely not post it. And they might say, "Well, my grandmother's pretty liberal. She wouldn't go. She's down with a lot." And you can say, "Well, that's fine, but I want you to think of a conservative grandmother because a lot of the people that are making these decisions are themselves conservative grandmothers. So make sure that it's something that would seem pretty benign to a grandmother if you're going to post it." Um, One thing that they might say is, "Oh my God, I'm just going to go home and delete all my social media accounts." That's actually not a great idea because they want to have some sort of a presence because, again, they can use this to their advantage to highlight things like service and their participation in extracurriculars and their family life, things that colleges really do want to see in their applicants. So deleting it is actually not the best idea, but revising it is fine. Going through and culling or cutting out portions that aren't good or things that aren't necessarily that don't show their best selves, that's something you should advise them to do. They shouldn't straight up just delete them. Um, Another thing that they just need to keep in mind is even if something is deleted, doesn't necessarily mean it's gone forever. Photos can be reposted, texts can be shared or saved. The things that they create have a half-life, even if they think they're gone. And so they really need to make sure that when they're posting things, they're really thinking about what could be the potential consequences of this, or is it really a wise decision? So gone doesn't actually mean gone. It kind of just means, in air quotes, gone. And then finally, it's important to make sure that some of the information that they have about themselves, the good stuff, is easy to find. And if they do have things that are private or personal, but they still do want to share them, that's fine, but they should make it a little bit harder to find those things. So making sure that you understand the sharing settings and the privacy settings on social media accounts is really important. Also, maximizing the ability for you to be found, the good stuff. I know students that have, like for example, they use Instagram as something that's personal and they lock it down except for their friends, but their Twitter account is open to the world and it's something that they purposefully make sure reflects their better self, so that it's a lot easier to find that good information than it is to find things that may not necessarily that are bad, but aren't as appealing to a college, like pictures of them on vacation or something in their Instagram feed. Above all, really, the kind of big message we want them to get from this lesson is that they're more than just a test score or a recommendation or a number when it comes to service hours, that they're a person. And we really want them to think of digital footprint as something that can be used as a vehicle to show colleges who they really are. So that's essentially the whole lesson in its entirety, very brief. Make sure that if you have any questions or anything like that, please let me know, because I don't want you to feel like this is something that you're being kind of led blindly into. And I'm of course very happy to help you plan out your lessons. So thanks so much for listening.